Tweet that out. Don't matter anymore. Hello there. This is not the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast, but that is Scott Docterman, and I am Rob Howe, and we called an instant reaction podcast today. Scott is back working on some football content, and I am back working on recovery from COVID. So I am not in Chicago. Had to put those plans to rest yesterday after I got the positive test. So fully vaxxed, Scott, and definitely decreased the symptoms than the first time I had it, when I couldn't move and was achy. So now it just feels like a cold.
Yeah, I remember you doing a podcast from kind of like a basement closet or something like that. Whatever it was a year and a half ago or whenever you had COVID the last time. But it's unfortunate for you. I know you're looking forward to that trip. You started to feel achy yesterday, and here you are, still in your home. And then, of course, you look outside and there's a good 4 or 5 inches of snow, and here we are. It's March for you.
The March Madness.
Yes.
Wish we had better news to discuss with you folks today. Iowa bows out of the Big Ten tournament, losing 73-69 to 13 seed Ohio State. Iowa was the 5 seed. Pretty entertaining game, Scott. 18 lead changes, 8 ties. So it certainly was competitive. I don't think any team led by more than 6 points at any given point in the game. So very competitive, little ragged and sloppy at times, but you're going to get that. I mean, Ohio State, I thought, got its pace in this game. Iowa was able to push it a little bit more in the second half, but I think overall in this game, Ohio State did what it wanted to do.
Yeah, it played a little bit more to its style. And I don't know that Ohio State has one that it used to have, kind of an identity. I think their identity is just, hey, let's just let the players go play and do whatever they want to do. And they've got some good athletes, and kind of like what we talked about yesterday on the hotspot, Rob, that just, it's really about mentality with Ohio State going into this tournament, and whether or not they cared or they just wanted their season to end. And they obviously cared with the way they played against Wisconsin. Although late, I was starting to wonder if they're going, man, we're going to blow our spring break. But they did hold on there. And then they did, today they played pretty well. It was a close, competitive game throughout. But really, when it came down to the clutch, the last 3 minutes, Iowa missed its last 4 shots. Ohio State was 5 of 7 from the field. And, Gale hit a couple of big ones, a 3 that put Ohio State up 3 with 3:17 left. And that really seemed to be not necessarily a dagger, but it was certainly a pinprick against the Hawkeyes.
Yeah, and that's usually the case when you have these nip and tuck games. It's a team that makes those plays at the end of the game. We talked about yesterday on the hotspot, or maybe it was Monday, but I think it was yesterday, about Iowa letting up on defense. And I thought Ohio State made some good plays. As you said, they have some really good individual talent. Gale being one of them, had a drive to the basket late, hit that 3 where, again, poor rotation, wide open look, in rhythm of the offense. Iowa did miss shots and opportunities at the end, but also let up on defense again.
Yeah, that was really a key, but overall, Iowa's defense was better. And I don't know if that was just because they played better, or it was because Ohio State just isn't that prolific on offense, other than having pretty good athletes making decent plays. The one troubling number, and this is the one that continues to bite them, is 3-point shooting on the road. I mean, they average, going in 28.5% on the road, whereas they usually average 38.6 at home. Well, today they shot 24%. They were 4-17. That turned out to be real problematic for Iowa, because in just about every other area, they were equal to or better than Ohio State. So I think that was really a critical component in this game was 3-point shooting. And then, the other part is, it really came down to that last scramble, though. When there was about 11 seconds left and the ball's just looking like a greased piece of fruit rolling up and down the court. And then Chris Murray kind of was sitting on the line a little bit, tapped it back, went out of bounds, stayed with Ohio State. If Iowa could have gotten that, it could have had one more shot to do something instead of making it a 4-point outcome, because then they had to foul. That they would have had one more shot at it, and who knows what have happened. We might still be watching the game instead of rapidly reacting to it.
Iowa with 11 turnovers today. Ohio State with only 8. Iowa with 11 assists and 11 turnovers. That's not a good formula for the Hawkeyes. And I'm with you. I think the D was better, but I think some of that had to do with, as you said, the pace of Ohio State. They were running clock, and so fewer possessions. You have to defend to the end of the clock. Iowa did well at times with that, and other times there were breakdowns, and there were too many breakdowns at the end. I thought, I don't want to get on Tony Perkins, because I thought he was one of the reasons why he was in that, Iowa was in that game. But he missed 2 big free throws down the stretch there that were really costly and uncharacteristic of him. And it wasn't just Tony. I mean, Tony played really hard. I thought he played good defense for the most part. And he was one of the guys that was able to break down Ohio State off of the dribble, which Iowa needed today.
Yeah, and that's true. I mean, with 2:26 left, he missed both those free throws. That was really critical. And then Ohio State came back with a 3-pointer. And they went up 4, and then Iowa was playing kind of back and forth and really was never able to get a stop, and stop the possessions and then be able to move. And then a lot has to do with defense. I thought the spacing that Ohio State had was really good against Iowa. Iowa just really doesn't do well on defense, period. They never really have. And I think that they were able to exploit that, get a few more one-on-one opportunities, and allow their offensive players to kind of go. And Iowa couldn't make up for it again. Iowa's been reliant upon a 3-point shooting, as a reliant 3-point shooting team all year long. And when you don't have that going, that's really going to be a problem. And when you see all these teams are really so balanced in the league that, and Ohio State blew out Iowa once, even though they're 13th in the Big Ten, and now they've won 3 in a row, I think 3 or 4 in a row. So they're coming to life a little bit at the end of the season. Iowa does have another game, at least one, but they're probably in that, I would say they're probably trending in the 9-10 range now. 9 doesn't matter. There's no difference between 9 and 8 except the color of your jersey, but 10 gets a little bit more difficult, but they're still in the same range that they probably should be. And now it's just going to be about matchups going forward. And, they're kind of at the mercy of whatever the bracket dictates. And if they play like they did today or against Nebraska, then it's going to be a quick yank. But if they can play the way they did against Indiana, they might be playing a second weekend. So it's really an unpredictable tournament. Now it's an unpredictable NCAA, Big Ten, and of course, very unpredictable Iowa basketball team.
Yeah, we talked about it yesterday. You talked about it at the top of this podcast. We didn't know what we were going to get from Ohio State because at the time we talked yesterday, they hadn't even played Wisconsin yet. So we didn't know what kind of, mentality the Buckeyes would have it in this tournament, because it's in a position, there's no doubt about it. You got to win 5 games in 5 days to go to the NCAA tournament. There's no other way to do it. I thought, 1, they played hard and focused. 2, Iowa was having its way early in that game, getting the ball to Rebraca. They adjusted to that and did a much better job of defending it. And then Iowa got some traction with the press at times in the second half, and Ohio State figured that out and was able to break that a little bit more. So I think a lot of credit deserves to go to Chris Holtmann and his team. I was like, man, why are you burning all your time out?
Yeah, right.
But it worked.
Yeah, it did. I was surprised when they were like 3 minutes to go or whatever, and they're
Yeah.
out of timeouts, and I thought, man, that's going to be a killer because Iowa is a pretty good pressure, full court press defense. That's what they like to do, cause problems. And there were some times where I thought Iowa had them, and the next thing you know, the ball squirts out there and then they get free. And I mean, I don't blame Iowa for that. I think it was just Ohio State. It wasn't even necessarily their execution as much as it was just, hey, they they were able to make it work. So it's really an interesting tournament, Rob, because as we've talked pretty much all year, but specifically yesterday, there's just not a lot of separation. Purdue on as a whole is better than everybody else, but then teams through to 13 are comparable depending on the day. And I'm not suggesting Ohio State's going to go off and win it. I'm not even remotely in that ballpark, but they, if Purdue gets knocked off, it wouldn't surprise me if they did, and that they could get Michigan State. And then, and playing Purdue on Saturday on your game 4 would be a very difficult matchup for Ohio State. But I do think that, they've got enough players and they're playing hard enough that I think they've got a chance to compete in these games. But I like Michigan State. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan State pulls it out the whole tournament.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think they're one of the teams that I would put somebody else's money on to win, this tournament. But yeah, and Ohio State, got off to a good start this season. They were ranked at early in the year, and then just as we talked about yesterday, unable to kind of come together and gel. Star freshmen, transfers, all that just never came together chemistry wise, but they caught it here. I think I saw a graphic on TV on the Big Ten Network, Scott, that this is the first time ever that in the first 4 games of the tournament, the lower seed has won. And we talked about that yesterday, how this could be wild. It's off to a wild start.
Yeah, I just wonder what's next. I mean, are we going to look at, and eventually is it going to be Ohio State versus Minnesota for the championship? I mean, how
go Gophers.
Yeah, mighty Gophers. Wouldn't that be something? The most miraculous tournament of all time. No, I think Minnesota's reign has come to an end, but I thought it was kind of funny that they beat Nebraska the other day. I mean, it just shows you, again, Nebraska played its best game and probably its worst game in the same week. Its best game coming back and beating Iowa on the road and then losing to the worst team in the league in the Big Ten tournament. So it's just here we are again, this tournament. So what do we have next? We have Illinois and Pennsylvania State.
Yes.
That's going to be a good game because, I mean, I really like Jalen Pickett. I think he's a very good player. And Illinois is kind of like Iowa. When they're playing well, they're very difficult to beat, but when they're pretty ordinary when they're not even close.
Michigan gets knocked off by Rutgers today, a Rutgers team that limped into this thing. And I don't know, just off the top of my head, Michigan's probably the most disappointing team in this conference this year when you think about just talent level on the roster. But like Ohio State, it never really came together. Michigan is 17-15 now and headed to the NIT at best.
Oh yeah, they're an NIT team. There's no question about that. I just don't. I think them and I think Wisconsin are NIT. I mean, I would be surprised if either one. It just shows you how watered down the field is if one of those two teams gets in.
Right, I agree.
I think they're both NIT teams. Penn State's the one that I kind of think, I
think it's down to Penn State and Rutgers, maybe?
I think Rutgers is in.
You think so? Okay.
Yeah. And I think Penn State's got a crack. So I think out of the 11 or so teams that, had a chance, I think Wisconsin and Michigan are on one side for sure. I think Rutgers is on the other. And I think Penn State might need a win. If Penn State gets a win, it might be end up in Dayton, so although it did beat Rutgers the other day. So it's going to be fascinating. But I mean, other than Purdue, if Purdue wins it, they're at least a 2. They're probably still a 2 no matter what happens. And then I would say Northwestern might be a 4 maybe a 5. And Michigan State's got some upward mobility depending on how it does. But I think Iowa right now is, it's trended downward. It lost those games on the road to Wisconsin and Northwestern. It had the miraculous comeback against Michigan State and then blew out Indiana, then lost this week to Nebraska and Ohio State. I mean, this is the weirdest year, I swear, for Iowa, especially.
Swept by Nebraska and lost 2 of 3 to Ohio State.
Swept by Wisconsin.
And Wisconsin, yeah.
It's just
an uneven season.
Yeah. And it's an uneven team, an uneven season. Again, I can't predict, people want kind of instant judgment as much as instant analysis. I can't give it for this team. I just don't know what to expect, because if they play well next week, yeah, they can win 2 games. If they don't, they're going to be home before we turn off the TV on Thursday.
You know how this works, though. I mean, people, I haven't been on social media, but I'm sure people are venting right now. Yeah. Like you said, no matter what Iowa did this week, I mean, it would have been great to win another Big Ten championship. We all know that it's starting next week where this team will be judged, and all Iowa teams now are judged. Can that team be the one to break the Sweet 16 drought?
What's weird, Rob, is what if this is the year? How would it feel? I mean, seriously, you have just such an up and down team. They're 19-13, 11-9 in the Big Ten. We just listed off their losses. They've had some big wins. But it doesn't feel like one of those teams where if they advance, that there's going to be this fervor and excitement, and maybe that will come after the second win. But I kind of wonder about that. It's kind of like a 7-5 football team. Do you celebrate the accomplishment, or do you just kind of, all right, they won the bowl game. Oh, all right, they go, even though they haven't been in the Sweet 16 in 24 years. It's just insane.
And it'll be interesting to see what that's like, because that would be the litmus test, right? After that second win, what's the reaction? What's the interest level? What's the excitement of that week leading from that second win to playing in that Sweet 16, where there's more focus on you, you get a better TV spot, all those things come into play. I think the fans would be jacked up at that point. And then depending on what happens in the Sweet 16, then you have your next instant reaction.
Right. it'll be knee jerk, and it'll be swift. And, if they lose, then it's not good. It's kind of the way it works. And, I remember the last one, I know you do too, where, Dr. Tom was a lame duck, and they got the second win. I think it was against Arkansas. Yeah. It was in a 4-5 game, and then went out and played UConn and was even leading with 7 minutes to go. And they were very competitive. And it felt like that was a really good conclusion for that team. It was a loss, but it wasn't like they got blown out, because we've seen that with some of these teams Iowa's had when they got rolled by Gonzaga and Villanova and, in some of these games. And, last year, the upset to Richmond. And so, if they go and they play Kansas or something like that and play hard, and maybe that would make people feel differently, but I kind of doubt it. But that said, they got to win 2 games, which they haven't done in 24 years, let alone winning 1. And after what we've seen this week, there's no guarantee on that one either.
Some stats for the folks, Scott. Individually, Philip Rebraca, 7 of 12 from the field, 6 of 6 from the line, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, did have 3 turnovers in 36 minutes, finished with 20 points. Aaron Eulis, 1 point, 0 for 1 from the floor, 1 for 2 from the line, 2 rebounds, no assists, no turnovers. Perkins, 16 points, 6 of 12 from the floor, 1 for 3 from 3, 3 from 5 from the line. We talked about the 2 misses, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, only 1 turnover. Not a bad game from Tony. Or actually, no, I'm reading the wrong line. I was reading Chris's stats. 4 turnovers for Tony. I thought that was wrong because he got a little loose with the basketball at times today. Chris Murray, 17, 7 of 17 from the floor, 2 of 8 from 3, 1 of 1 from the line, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 1 turnover. Connor McCaffrey, did not score. 0 for 2 from the field, 0 for 2 from 3, a rebound, an assist, 3 personal fouls, 2 turnovers, not his best game. And then Patrick gave him 9 off the bench. Peyton Sanford with just 4 off of the bench in 15 minutes. And Josh Dix had a bucket in 6 minutes. Really, Fran leaned a lot on the starters today. And it would have been interesting because we talked about this yesterday. Tomorrow, they would have had to dig a lot deeper into the bench. But obviously, that first game, you got to win. So you play your best players or who you think is going to give you the best chance to win. And Iowa starters logged a lot of heavy minutes. Who knows? Maybe that factored into some of the offensive, misses late in that game. You lose your legs. You're not as fresh. You don't have as much rest. I don't know. I'm not making excuses, but sometimes that's a factor.
Yeah, I think part of this was Peyton Sanford got whistled for a couple of really bad foul calls. I thought
the refs were seeing ghosts today. I thought a little bit.
There was one foul that was definitely on Ulis that they called on Sanford, and that sent him to the bench. And that's, he only played 15 minutes. He wasn't really very good. And a lot of times it's that, it's like getting whistled for something, but really Iowa needed to get more from its backcourt. Perkins was decent, didn't handle the ball really that well, but from, Connor McCaffrey not scoring, had more turnovers than assists. That doesn't happen very often. And Ulis with, 1 point, 2 rebounds and no assists in 17 minutes. You just can't have that. You got to have more from that. And, Rebraca and Murray were pretty good, as usual. Perkins came through offensively and scoring, but the other part of his game was not real successful. And then the rest of them were just kind of guys. And, this team needs a little bit more balance to be successful. And when it is more balanced, it's one of the better teams in the country. I'm not saying they're the best, but I'm saying that they can compete. But with not, they are awfully ordinary. And that's kind of what I thought happened today.
So you have the loss on the last game of the season that would have given you the double bye and would not have played today. So that was a disappointment. Now you have another disappointment today, being one and done in the tournament. And now you've gotten to that point in the journey, Scott, where the next loss, you're done.
Yeah.
So this team needs to come to terms with that and know that there's no more tomorrow at this point. It's a sense of urgency. If you want, this is the only time this team is going to be together. If you guys want to be remembered, you got to come together and figure it out.
Yeah. They've got a week to kind of get their head straight, to figure out what they want to do. And, there are teams, we've seen it at Iowa where they've been somewhat burned out and they've been, I won't say apathetic. I mean, they want to win, but where you could tell that their heart isn't in it as much. And then there have been teams that have been really committed and really focused. And it's going to be interesting to see what their mindset is and wherever they go and the people that are around them. Can they spot that? Can they sense whether or not Iowa is loose and ready to go, or if they're tight and kind of, tough mentally? I mean, it's going to tell you a lot, because I've seen them. I remember in 16 in particular, and in 14 where they were pretty mentally beat up. 16, they just didn't look like they wanted to be there very much, and they were a very talented team. And in 14, the strain of a long season, and then Patrick's surgery, really changed the dynamic of that. And then you look at, 19 when they were down 25 in the second half to Tennessee and came back and forced overtime. So so they have an opportunity to just to do what we said they could do, or they could say, just shut it down. But they've got a week to figure it out, probably the weekend, to just get up some shots on their own, figure some things out, lay around their houses, and then focus from there, because they'll be on spring break for a week. So, although you wouldn't know it outside.
No, not at all. Snow still flying around here in the corridor, as we call it here.
Right.
So yeah, we wait Sunday. We'll find out after the Big Ten tournament championship game that Iowa will not be playing in this year. We will find out where Iowa's headed. I think we're pretty comfortable, Scott and I, in saying that it's going to be an 8. They'll be in the 8-9 game, or they'll be in the 7-10 game as the 10. I don't see Iowa getting a 7 seed, but I've been wrong before. Scott's the bracketologist in this relationship. I really don't know what's going on with that, but I will take his word for it.
Yeah, I think 9 or 10 is probably where it's at. And right now I'd probably trend in the other way, the 10, because
you think they've fallen low enough to get Des Moines?
That's why I don't think they are. I think that what'll happen is, like, let's say Illinois craps out tonight or whatever, and they're in that kind of 8, 9, 10 range, along with maybe Rutgers too, or something like that, that they could gerrymander the snake any way they want to. And I could see, like I said, Illinois ended up in Vets Auditorium. No, I'm kidding. Wells Fargo. And whereas I could see Iowa getting sent to Sacramento or Albany or someplace.
Sacramento would be cool. It'd be a reunion for the Murrays.
Yeah, there you go. That would be great. Although I'm sure he's not there, because that's why they have the tournament there.
Yes.
Unless it's a day off or something. But even then, they've got that whole block off. Orlando would be a possibility, Greensboro. But if you're a 10, you've got to figure you're going to a 2's destination. So you're looking at Purdue. It could be Columbus.
Yeah.
But no, you wouldn't be playing Purdue. Well, you did only play them once, so it's possible, I guess.
Was Columbus where the Tennessee game was?
That sounds right.
I think so.
Yeah.
Back in 19.
Right. So yeah, very well could be there. There's a lot of different possibilities. So, that's one that I think fans would appreciate, just because it's drivable. If you want to drive there, you might not want to. And they were a 10 then too, if I recall.
I think you're right.
They beat the 7. They beat Cincinnati and then played Tennessee, which was a 2. This time around they might have to play Purdue, because they have only played once. So that as long as it's not a first round matchup, just like somebody like Iowa State, if they would have won today, maybe Iowa State would have been an 8-9 game. Imagine that 8-9 game in Des Moines. It's Iowa State.
Iowa State got a good win today against Baylor. So Iowa State, the Cyclones are trending up with their seed.
7-10.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Let's do it. I think that then there'd be some serious interest around here.
If you see that line and it says 7-10 Iowa State, Iowa, you will see that team had better be sharp. I mean, it's one thing you're playing, take your pick, around like Providence or somebody like that. Oklahoma State, you kind of, and you don't play well and you lose, you move on. If you don't play well against Iowa State in the tournament, you'll hear about it for, 9 months, or at least to the end of the until football season starts to really take place.
We will find out on Sunday night when those brackets come out. I wanted to do the read, Scott. I almost forgot to do the read. I will do it now. That support for these podcasts comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. Appreciate all of our sponsors. We appreciate you guys hopping on with us and listening to this podcast. And we would have done one tomorrow, but we're off. And we'll be back, as we said yesterday, hopefully on Monday with a Hotspot podcast. But until then, enjoy the rest of your week and weekend, and we will talk to you early next week. Say goodbye, Scott.
Goodbye, Scott.